Ever feel like you're talking to a brick wall at work? Like no matter how much you try to explain things, you just can't seem to get your point
Well,
across.
absolutely. I think we've all been there. That feeling of frustration when it seems like you're speaking a completely different language than everyone else.
Yeah, or when your calendar is just packed with meetings that could have been emails, and those emails themselves just disappear into some sort of black hole, never to be seen again.
The irony is, we have all this technology to connect us, but sometimes it feels like it just makes effective communication harder.
Exactly. So today we're taking a deep dive into some really interesting ideas about how to make that communication a lot clearer, more concise, and ultimately more effective, especially in a work setting. We're drawing on the work of Chris Fenning and his first-minute concept, which is all about making those crucial opening moments of any work-related interaction really count. We're going to be looking at some articles and insights from folks who have used his ideas and seen some real results. And our mission here really is to pull out the most practical tips and strategies so you can walk away from this deep dive with some actionable tools to immediately level up your communication game.
The interesting thing is, it's not just about feeling understood, it's about making the most of your time. Because think about it, how much time do we all waste trying to clarify things, going back and forth, when we could have been productive?
A lot. I mean, some studies suggest that we can spend up to 40% of our work week just trying to untangle communication breakdowns. That's almost half our week.
Yeah.
So yeah, any technique that helps us streamline that is a real game changer.
Absolutely. And that's where this 1-minute communication technique we're exploring comes in. It's about maximizing that initial minute of interaction to make sure your message lands and resonates.
And the key takeaway here is that this isn't about the initial pleasantries, the how was your weekend chat. The first minute starts the second the conversation shifts gears into work mode. It's that crucial window where you set the tone and establish how you're going to be perceived. And what we've seen in the research is that those initial moments can have a huge impact on how people see your competence and even your overall career trajectory.
It's interesting, isn't it, how that first impression, those initial seconds, can really color someone's perception of your abilities, even if you have a ton of experience and expertise to offer.
Yeah, it's almost like setting the stage for the entire interaction. If you stumble in those first few moments, it can be really tough to recover and regain that sense of confidence and clarity. And one of the things that really struck me in the research is this idea that it takes about 8 good impressions to outweigh just one bad one. So while it's definitely possible to turn things around, it does take consistent effort. But it's encouraging to know that it is possible, that you can reshape that perception.
Definitely. And the good news is that it doesn't require some massive overhaul of your personality or anything like that. It's about focusing on a few key principles and techniques, like the issue framework we're going to talk about, which can make a huge difference in how you're perceived and how effectively you communicate.
Right. So the issue framework is this really neat tool for setting the stage for any work-related conversation in just the first 15 seconds. That's it. Just 15 seconds to get everyone on the same page. And it does this by hitting 3 key elements: context, intent, and key message.
The beauty of that 15-second time limit is that it forces you to be concise and to really think about what's most important. It's easy to get bogged down in details or background information, but this framework keeps you laser focused on what the other person needs to know right away.
Okay, so let's start with context. This is basically setting the scene, providing that essential background information. And the key here is to remember that the person you're talking to is probably juggling a million different things in their mind.
Hmm.
You can't just assume they know exactly what you're referring to, even if it's something you've talked about before.
Yeah, especially in a work setting, we're all bombarded with information all day long. It's easy for things to slip through the cracks. So even if it seems obvious to you, taking those few extra seconds to just quickly state the subject, whether it's the name of a project, a specific client, or the general topic you're going to discuss, like a new policy or some sales figures, it immediately establishes that shared understanding and prevents a lot of confusion down the line.
Makes sense. And that brings us to the second element: intent. This is all about making it crystal clear why you're bringing this up. What's the purpose of this conversation? What do you need from the other person?
Yeah, because our brains are wired to try and figure out what to do with information. If you don't provide that clear intent up front, people can get sidetracked, make incorrect assumptions, or even take actions that aren't necessary. And then you have to backtrack and start all over again, which wastes everyone's time and energy.
Totally. There's a great example in one of the articles we looked at about a guy named Daniel who was so excited about fixing a software bug that he just launched into this long explanation to his colleague Emma. but he never actually explained why he was telling her this. So Emma assumed it was still a problem, got all stressed out, started trying to fix it herself, only to find out later that Daniel had already taken care of it.
It's a classic case of unclear intent leading to chaos and wasted effort. And the sources offer this really useful breakdown of 5 main categories of intent in a work setting. Are you seeking help or advice? Requesting an action? Providing information? Reporting progress? Or seeking approval or a decision?
That's a great framework. So for example, if you need help, you might say something like, hey, I'm running into a roadblock with this project and I could really use your input. If you're requesting action, it could be something like, can you please send me those updated figures by the end of the day? Providing information might be as simple as, just a heads up, the team meeting has been moved to tomorrow afternoon. Reporting progress. Just wanted to let you know that website redesign is on track for next week's launch. And if you need approval, I've finalized the proposal. Just need your sign-off before we send it to the client.
And the sources even address casual conversation like, hey, I came across this interesting article, thought you might find it relevant. It's about signaling that, too.
Right. It's about setting those expectations right from the start. Yeah. And when you combine that clear intent with the context we talked about earlier, it creates a really powerful opening. The listener immediately knows what you're going to be talking about and what you need from them or what they should expect from the conversation.
It sets them up to listen effectively and respond appropriately. And then the final piece of that initial 15-second puzzle is the key message,
which the sources describe as the BLUF bottom line up front. And this comes from the U.S. military, which I think is a pretty good testament to its effectiveness.
Yeah, when you think about it, the military is all about clear, concise communication, especially in high-pressure situations. And BLUF is all about cutting to the chase, delivering that most crucial piece of information right up front.
Exactly. And it really answers that unspoken question the listener has. Okay, why are you telling me this? The key message is the headline, the single most important takeaway. So instead of a long-winded explanation, it's about getting straight to the point, like, we just closed a deal with our biggest client yet, or heads up, the main sales system is going to be down for maintenance all day Tuesday. Boom! You've got their attention and they know what to expect.
It's like when you take your car to the mechanic. The first thing you want to know is how much it's going to cost and how long it's going to take to fix. You don't need a detailed breakdown of every single thing that's wrong with the engine right away. You need that essential information up front.
Exactly. And the sources make a good point that if you don't deliver that key message clearly, the listener's mind can start racing with all these questions. Why is this relevant to me? What am I supposed to do with this information? And that could derail the whole conversation.
Absolutely. So to recap that issue framework, those first 15 seconds are about clearly stating the context, what you're going to be talking about, the intent, why you're bringing it up, and the key message, that most important takeaway. And when you nail those 3 elements, you've created a really strong foundation for a more efficient and focused conversation.
Right. You've given the listener everything they need to understand the purpose and importance of what you're about to say. But what happens when you have more than one topic to cover? Because let's face it, that's pretty common in the real world. Especially in emails, things can get really messy when you're trying to cram multiple things into one message.
And that's where the issue framework can actually help you identify if you're dealing with multiple topics in the first place. If you find yourself needing to shift gears, provide different background information, or change your intent as you go along, that's a pretty clear sign that you're actually trying to cover more than one subject.
Yeah. And the sources introduce this concept they call the ambush, which I love. It's that moment when the intent you stated at the beginning doesn't match up with the action you request later on. Like you start by saying you just want to give some updates, but then you end up asking for a major decision or approval.
It can leave the listener feeling blindsided, like the rug was pulled out from under them, and it can damage trust because it feels like the purpose of the conversation was misrepresented.
So to avoid those ambushes and manage those multi-topic conversations effectively, they introduce the conversation framework,
which is basically acknowledging upfront that you have more than one thing to talk about. So instead of just launching into the first topic, you clearly state how many different things you want to discuss and give a brief overview of the intent for each one. And then you address each topic separately, making those transitions really clear as you go along.
Right. There's a great example in one of the articles about a guy named Timothy who needed to talk to his manager about 3 different things: a problem with a recent delivery, an award nomination for a colleague, and a request for some personal time off. So instead of just starting with the delivery issue, he could say something like, hey, I've got 3 quick things to chat about today. First, I need your advice on a delivery that went wrong. Second, I'd like to get your approval on an award nomination. And third, I need to talk about a leave request.
Giving that clear roadmap up front makes a world of difference. The manager knows what to expect and can mentally prepare for each topic.
Exactly. And the sources also address what to do when you have multiple topics that all fall under the same general context. Like, say you're giving an update on a new market expansion. You might have information about the team's performance and then a separate decision that needs to be made about staffing. Even though it's all related to the same market expansion because the intent is different for each topic, they should be treated as separate conversations, each with its own mini-issue framework within the larger discussion.
Right. It's about making those distinctions clear, even when there's a shared background. So now you've nailed those first 15 seconds with the issue framework, clearly establishing the context, intent, and key message. What's next?
Well, that's where the structure summary comes in. And this is all about providing a roadmap for the rest of the conversation, filling in the rest of that crucial first minute. And while a lot of communication advice talks about summarizing, the sources we looked at do a really good job of breaking down how to do it effectively.
And they introduce this really helpful and memorable principle called the GPS principle: goal, problem, solution.
And I love that they actually point out how the way they introduce the structure summary itself follows this GPS model. The goal is to communicate complex topics clearly. The problem is that a lot of communication advice doesn't offer practical guidance on summarizing, and the solution they provide is the GPS principle. It's meta, but it really drives the point home.
It's a great way to illustrate how this principle can be applied in a real-world setting. And the sources point out some common traps that people fall into when trying to summarize, like getting bogged down in too much detail too quickly, letting the conversation drift off topic, or dwelling on the history of a problem instead of focusing on potential solutions.
Yeah, we've all been in those meetings where someone goes off on a tangent or gets lost in the weeds, and you completely lose track of what they're trying to say. And the key takeaway here is that most workplace conversations, at their core, are about solving problems.
So the GPS structure summary provides that clear, logical flow. You state the goal, what you're aiming to achieve, then you identify the problem, what's standing in your way, and finally, you propose a solution, how you're going to overcome that obstacle and reach the goal.
That GPS acronym is so helpful. It's like a roadmap for the entire conversation. And it's important to remember that the goal and the problem should be distinct elements. The goal is that desired outcome, the positive end state, while the problem is that specific obstacle you're facing.
Exactly. And what's interesting is that the sources address those situations where you might not have the solution figured out yet. In those cases, the solution part of your structure summary can actually be a question where you're explicitly asking for help or input.
Yeah, but they encourage you to at least try to brainstorm a couple of potential solutions before you ask for help. It shows that you've put some thought into it and makes it easier for the other person to jump in and contribute their expertise.
It's like showing that you've done your homework, that you're not just coming to them with a problem and expecting them to solve it for you. And there are some really good examples in the sources that show how this all comes together.
Yeah, like the one about the lost shipment. Instead of launching into a long, detailed account of everything that went wrong, Sham could have used the issue framework, saying something like, hey, I just got off the phone with Davidson Group and there's a problem. They haven't received their latest shipment and they're asking for a full refund.
Right. Immediately setting the context, intent, and key message.
Exactly. And then she could follow up with that GPS structure summary.
Huh.
Our goal is to make sure Davidson Group either gets their order or receives a full refund as they prepaid last month. The problem is that I can't locate the shipment in our system, and the refund amount is above my authorization level. So my proposed solution is for you to authorize the refund. And maybe you could also help me track down the missing goods.
It's so much clearer and more efficient than trying to explain everything at once. And there's another great example about a firewall policy that shows how this framework can be used to cut through technical jargon and get straight to the point. The goal is to comply with new regulations. The problem is that the current firewall doesn't meet those standards, and the proposed solution is to develop an upgrade plan.
It's really amazing how these seemingly simple tools can make such a big difference in the clarity and effectiveness of our communication.
Absolutely. But I know some people might be thinking, okay, this is all well and good for relatively straightforward situations. But what about when the topics are really complex and nuanced? Can you really boil those down into a 1-minute overview?
And the sources actually address that very question. They share this great anecdote about a group of NASA engineers who were trying to explain the importance and cost of the International Space Station to a healthcare executive who had no background in aerospace engineering. And despite the mind-boggling complexity of the topic, they were able to use that GPS framework to summarize it in a way that everyone could understand.
The goal was to have a science lab in space to conduct research. The problem was the inherent danger and remoteness of space, and the solution involved significant ongoing funding to ensure safety and maintenance.
It's a perfect example of how even the most intricate topics can be broken down into those core elements. And the sources then go on to explore some of the common reasons why workplace communication can get so needlessly complex in the first place.
One big factor is simply assuming that the other person thinks the same way we do, has the same background knowledge, and processes information in the same way.
Yeah, it's easy to forget that not everyone is on the same page as us. We also tend to fall into the trap of thinking that the other person needs every single detail in order to understand the situation.
And we can get sidetracked by tangential issues or related but less critical variables instead of staying laser-focused on the core problem. Or we try to tackle multiple problems at once, which can be really overwhelming for the listener.
It's like trying to drink from a fire hose. And the advice the sources offer is to really focus on identifying that absolute essential information the listener needs to give you the response you're looking for, whether it's a decision, some advice, or a specific action. And if you're dealing with multiple problems, the recommendation is to break them down and address them separately, using those issue frameworks and structure summaries within a broader conversation framework like we talked about earlier.
The only exception being when those multiple problems are all stemming from a single root cause. In that case, it makes sense to address that root cause directly.
So, to bring it all back to the beginning, the key message from all of this research is that effective workplace communication starts with that clear and concise opening in the first minute. That means using the issue framework context, intent, key message in those first 15 seconds to get everyone on the same page. And then following that up with the structure, summary, goal, problem, solution in the remaining 45 seconds to provide that roadmap for the rest of the conversation.
And as straightforward as these techniques might seem, they do require conscious effort and practice to really master. It might feel a little awkward or unnatural at first, but trust me, the long-term payoff in terms of more efficient, impactful, and less frustrating communication is totally worth it.
It's like learning any new skill. It takes time and effort to get comfortable with it, but once you do, it becomes second nature.
Absolutely. So the challenge for you, our listeners, is to start implementing these strategies right away, even in your smaller, less formal interactions at work.
The next time you're about to start a work-related conversation, whether it's in person, on a call, or even in an email, take a moment to really think about those key elements. Can you clearly identify the context? Is your intent immediately obvious? Are you delivering that key message up front? And can you briefly outline the goal, the problem, and your proposed solution?
Because once you start seeing how much more smoothly your conversations flow, how much clearer your communication becomes, you'll be amazed at the difference it makes.
And here's a thought to leave you with. As you go about your week, pay attention to those moments where communication breakdowns occur. Those times when you feel like you're not being heard or understood, or when things get unnecessarily complicated. What are the hidden costs of those breakdowns? How much time and energy are you wasting? How is it impacting your relationships, your productivity, and even your overall career trajectory? Mastering that first minute of communication isn't just about making small tweaks to how you talk. It has the potential to transform your entire work experience, making you a more effective, more influential, and ultimately more successful professional.
It's about ensuring that your voice is heard, that your ideas are understood, and that you're making the most of every interaction.
So take that first step, embrace the power of the first minute, and watch as your communication skills soar to new heights.
You might be surprised at the amazing things that can happen when you simply start by getting your message across clearly and effectively.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. We'll catch you next time.
See you then.